Good morning. Welcome to another episode of Fearless and Free TV. This morning, I am so excited to share with you an old friend of mine, Cynthia Lamb. So Cynthia and I met in March of 2009. I was at the very, very bottom of what I now call my holy shift. And I had nothing to my name. Literally, we were in the middle of a bankruptcy and foreclosure and all of that. And I had I had been working on a book about my memoirs growing up in the polygamist cult. And I wanted to learn how to be an inspirational speaker so that I could speak eloquently about the childhood and about the book I had just written. And I was looking into attending courses to learn how to be a public speaker. And they were so crazy expensive, like $5,000 for a weekend event. And what happened is that Spirit kind of nudged me before I even knew that that's what it was. My higher self nudged me to look into Toastmasters. Now, Toastmasters wasn't a new thing for me. I had attended a Toastmasters about 20 years earlier in my early 20s. And I was so terrified of public speaking that I promised myself I would never again go to another Toastmasters meeting. So here I was in 2009 going to a Toastmasters meeting. Never say never, right? And this is where I met Cynthia. And Cynthia has become one of my very dearest friends and comrades in spiritual awakening and spiritual teaching. And she was the first person to introduce me to the concept of light workers. So I'm going to bring her on and we can talk a little bit about where she's been and where she's going and what she teaches. And I'm just super excited to share her with all of you. So here's Cynthia.
Hi there.
Hi. So I know you've heard that story before about Toastmasters, and what happened is at the end of the first Toastmasters meeting I went to, they invited me to do table topics at the end. I was so terrified. I told my friend, I almost hit her in the car on the way home for making me go to this meeting with her. And then as we know, as you and I both know, Toastmasters can transform lives. And it's one of the best investments I've ever made in myself. In 2009, it was $40 to join, and I didn't have $40. That's how little money we had because of what 2008 had done to our businesses and our family situation. And I, got my husband to approve it because at the time he was the only one that had any idea of what was happening financially with us, and probably the best $40 I've ever invested in myself. Yeah. So March 2009, I remember meeting you in my second meeting when I actually agreed to join Toastmasters. And after the meeting, you said to me, "You're a light worker." And I said, "What is that?" And in genuine Cynthia fashion, you said, "Oh, you'll figure it out." And that, here I am. What's funny about that is over the years, when I would ask you questions, that was your response. And one time I asked you, "Why do you answer me that way?" Instead of giving me an answer, and you said, "Because you have it within you to figure it out for yourself." And that really frustrated me. And at the same time, I really appreciated the confidence that you had in me to find my own answers.
Yeah, so good. So this is one thing that can really frustrate people on the path is they want, we're so used to being spoon-fed, just somebody give it to me, give me that pill or that quick fix thing. And my way is not, I'm not the fast food of spirituality by any means. I think my method is more about helping people realize their own innate divinity and bring forward their own gifts and clear the obstacles that are in their way, which are unique. And as you know, requires being willing to go deep.
Yeah. And it can be incredibly uncomfortable. And I remember that one of the things that you said to me before is the best gems are in the shit. And being willing to really dig dig down into the suffering to find them. And healing isn't a quick fix, and it's well worth the effort.
It's so worth it, and the process is painful. The thing is that once you understand that the pain will be lifted the moment you get to the core issue, and then, of course, access some compassion, the pain just lifts. So it's transformative, but it's getting to the pain. Most people are so resistant to even attempt to get to their own pain.
Right, because it is so uncomfortable. And what I haven't shared with with my audience is that there were times when I was at the beginning of this, what I now call my holy shift, my personal spiritual awakening, that I basically had 2-year-old temper tantrums with myself. And in the willingness to cry like a broken child. And learning how to hold myself in compassion through that process. And I think that's a process, as you said, that people are afraid to go through, because in the midst of it, it is so painful. But the freedom that comes on the other end of it is so well worth it.
So worth it. Yeah, I mean, we have a fragmented personality. The personality is formed when we're very small. So sometimes we have 2-year-old parts, 5-year-old parts, 9-year-old parts, whatever age we have a trauma stuck. And so the personality is locked in that age and that stage and that feeling. And if we don't get to it and get the compassion running and free it up, like allow it to kind of bubble up and emote and unlock, and then we can look at the irrationalities that part was running and free those up. That is the path of liberation. It's an integration process. It's integrating all of the parts of the personality into the whole, into the higher self, and allowing the higher part, the part that's connected to the soul, to be the one driving the bus. Because I think before we do our integration work, we have personality aspects that are driving our bus. And these are usually running very limiting stories, very disempowering stories, fear-based stories. And so when we can get in there with compassion, we can take the wheel back. And that's where the power comes, when we really line up inside with the will of our soul. It's
right. Yeah, and that's a term that I learned from you, is the will of our soul. It wasn't even a term that was on my radar before I met you. And this idea that our soul is actually the one who is managing the avatar that we're in, and learning how to align our will, our desire with our soul, which is actually the aspect that has chosen for us to embody in this form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And I think that that's a common thing for most people. Most of us who were born in some kind of organized religion have heard the will of God.
Mm-hmm.
You're supposed to surrender it over to the will of God. You're supposed to let it go, let the will of God. And what happens often is that there's a separation that takes place where people become very passive in their own lives. So they are just sitting back and feeling like a victim, feeling like a leaf blowing in a storm that's just kind of at the mercy of the wind. And so for me, the soul is where it's really at, because the soul is what we're in contact with. The soul, our higher self, is plugged into our own soul. This is where we get our intuition. It's where we get our guidance. It's where the connection is. So all direction is going to come from our own soul. And we can trust that our soul is in alignment with whatever you look at as God consciousness. I like to just say consciousness or loving, because I think sometimes God, people think it's outside, and it's not outside of ourself. That you are part of that greater consciousness.
Yeah, and I think if we remember, I always go back to the term that God is love. And when we think of God as love consciousness itself, It's much easier to understand how God love is everywhere present and that all of us are aspects of it. So the will of our soul actually is the will of love consciousness through our soul. It's not like the will of our soul is separate from the will of God, because it's one and the same.
That's accurate. Yeah. And then our personality gets in the way, and, we hear all of these reasons why we shouldn't follow the will of our soul. And so, that's really the process of waking up and integrating and doing the inner work, is learning how to listen and then learning how to follow the soul's
Right.
will. And it can be challenging.
Yeah, because sometimes it's completely the opposite of the ego, the fractured ego, the fractured aspects of the ego wants to be in charge, what is afraid of what the soul might be asking us to do. And part of it I'm finding is learning how to, in essence, comfort my ego and say, hey, we got this. You're okay. You're safe. You're fine. We're going to go with this. And really that's what the ego wants, is to feel like it's okay being in the process of following the will of our soul.
Absolutely. The personality's job is to keep us safe. The personality is formed as a child because it's traumatic to be a sensitive being, a soul, a loving soul born into this fear-based right wrong reality. And the construct of the personality is formed to keep us safe in that,
Right.
prevent us from feeling unloved, unworthy, uncared for, rejected, abandoned, all the things that come up in this fear-based right wrong reality. Personality is designed so that we survive. And once we get to adult age and we wake up spiritually, that's where we can really look at, okay, I've survived. Now, is this personality construct working for me? Like, how's it going that I have this part that wants to keep me so small? Right?
Right. And not have resentment toward it. So that's one of the things that I find, is that people have been part of the spiritual conditioning, and even in our religiosities, is to almost hold a resentment toward our personality self, our ego self, and instead learn how to understand it and see it through the eyes of love. And it is simply attempting to protect us and move us forward in the way that it understands.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I think that that's part of self exploration, is really coming to peace with that and learning all about the parts of the personality and why they're doing what they're doing. And when we can understand that every part of the personality, and I mean every, even a part that's indulging in addictions or self-harm or abusive behaviors or putting other people down, it doesn't matter what the personality is doing. Every aspect of the personality has an underlying loving motivation for its behavior. It was formed to defend, it was formed to protect. And so when we can find that loving motivation, then we can start to get on our own side and kind of have our own back. And that helps us bring the personality aspects in and love them up where they integrate. I think that so many people get led astray by a lot of teachings that say you want to just kick those personality aspects to the curb, like kill the ego and don't listen to those thoughts and, shut that part up. And what ends up happening is that then there's this divide, and then we do resent the personality aspects. And so my way is really about loving all the parts of and embracing them no matter what the behavior, and reeling them in. Radical self-acceptance.
Yeah, and the way that I see that, and there are two terms that I work with that. One is to remember all of our broken parts. We're bringing them back into the member of our whole being and restoring who we were when we came in at our moment of birth.
Yeah.
And so when we come in, and you taught me this, that we are basically little bubbles of love when we're born. We're love in a body, and then we learn fear. And as we learn fear, we start to disown aspects of ourself that we've been told or that we believe are not lovable. And this process that you teach is about bringing ourselves back into the whole being that we were at the moment of birth, or even at the moment of conception, that we were pure, absolute love, and restoring that wholeness.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
It is. It's really
Talking about it makes me just feel really connected and centered and whole. Yeah,
yeah.
totally doable.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that we don't have moments, because we do. We're human beings, love having a human experience. And so we have moments, even with all the work that we've done to come to this place of pure love, there are still moments that we get triggered up. This is part of being human.
Yeah.
And I think people need to understand that.
Yeah. And I like to try to be as transparent as I can, especially with my students and clients, because I think that it doesn't really serve to have this idea that there's this spiritual teacher who's totally enlightened and, like up here on this pedestal or something like that. I mean, we're all equal and we all have our own stuff. And I just had a really hard year. I was so triggered this year. I had more stuff come up this year than I've had to deal with in probably decades. And it was really challenging. And I'm coming out of it, thank goodness. And I finally have some self-acceptance running.
Now, is that 2020 or the beginning of 2021, or just in the past year in general?
2020. Yeah. I think that I knew this time in our evolutionary history was coming. I had foreseen it in a near-death experience back when I was 18, but I had really blocked the kind of bad parts, the hard parts, the challenging parts. I had blocked a lot of what was actually going to happen, how it was going to transpire. And I had taken all of the lessons, the lessons in healing and compassion and loving and oneness. And I had moved forward and was teaching all of that. And then last March, it just kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, wow, okay, here we go. Like, buckle your seatbelts. This is it. We're in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I had some real grief come up. And I dealt with, I spent a lot of 2020 crying, just crying and crying and crying, and really grieving for humanity. And
Mm-hmm.
also having like a sense of over responsibility come back, which I hadn't felt in a long time. I think in my earlier years, I had felt this big weight of responsibility as this, spiritual teacher, that I was here to help wake up a bunch of people. And I really felt like I just hadn't done what I was supposed to do. And so that was what I went through this last year. I had to really forgive myself. I also had a moment where I went into some bad mother judgment. And I judged myself as a bad mother because of the direction my children went. And so it was an interesting year. I'm so glad it's over.
Yeah, 2020 was rough. I, like you, I mean, we were talking about the Great Awakening, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
We knew this was coming. And I was saying, 5 or 6 years ago, that by 2020, we won't even recognize this place. I had no idea to that degree. I mean, I was shocked by it. And it's not anything that I didn't know was coming. It was just that it was there and so prevalent and so big and so in our face and so fast and furious.
Yeah.
And like you, I went through some judgments of, I didn't do enough to prepare people for this. I didn't wake enough people up spiritually. And then I went through the, as you did, this in self-judgment about not being a good enough mom, as I know a lot of us who are spiritual teachers are facing right now, because a lot of our children aren't seeing what it is we had hoped they would see. And I, and as I've mentioned on the show before, I ended my marriage. Well, sort of. It's got about a month left before it's official, but I took the steps of choosing to separate from my husband. And Spirit had been telling me for years I needed to do that, but 2020, it was like the 2x4 to the back of my head that I needed to do it, and I needed to do it now. His soul told me that our contract was complete and that I needed to let him go.
Mm.
And then I ended up with this whole thing with my kids, who hated me for a couple of months and had decided I'm one of the most horrible human beings on the planet. Because and that, and I know stories behind your kids, and I get how it feels. I think part of the reason you and I have experienced this is we're understanding how the divine feminine feels being rejected by us, how Mother Earth feels being rejected by us, and having to learn how to continue to love ourselves through this process, and being compassionate with ourselves, and trusting that what we need to be moving forward is an example of what's possible. We can't make anybody be the way we want them to be, as hard as we would want them to. We have to let them move on their own path.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that it's one of those really, really tough lessons in letting go and in acceptance. My daughter said to me, I was in this conversation with her where I was really sharing a feeling about how sad I was. And she said to me, Mom, you raised us to be free thinkers.
Hmm.
And now you have to let us think for ourselves. She said, you have to let us, I am a free thinker, she said. And, she basically said, you raised me right. And now I'm exercising my free will choice, and I'm choosing differently than you would have chosen. And I was really able to hear her. It was hard. It was hard to let go, because I have such a uh, firm belief in natural healing, and a really firm belief in my own guidance and what direction we need to go to be healthy. And my daughter just she wasn't there. And so another thing that really helped was one of my friends said to me, Cynthia, the thing you have to remember is that your children are not your students. And
Mm.
oh, right. Right. Like, my message is for the people who resonate with me. And those are the people who are going to find me and become my students or clients. And my children are not my students. So,
Yeah,
acceptance.
it's hard. It's hard because we want what's best for them, and we want them to be able to experience the bliss that we've found within ourselves. And at the same time, they got to go through their own stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And that letting go, allowing them to have their own curriculum, allowing them to have their own lessons, and to create their own suffering, even if that's what ends up happening. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
you know, how to let go and allow that, and just be with it in a way without any of the judgment, really, because I think I was in judgment. I was judging myself, but I was also judging my children.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a painful place to be. And so, it feels a lot easier now that I've moved through it, and I really have some acceptance, that they're making their own choices. They're doing, what they see as right at this time. and really all of humanity. I mean, I think that for me, the children was like the hardest part to get over because that was my attachment,
It's
right?
our stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that was really my stuff. But once I was able to really accept that my children are going to make their own choices in this really, intense moment in history, I surrendered. And it really helped because now I feel like I can hold for all of humanity. I feel like I can hold for anyone who makes a choice to align with a fear based reality rather than loving. And
Right.
it's all right.
Because ultimately, as I remind people that free will choice is the prime directive on our planet,
Yeah.
that is ultimately it. That everything is based in choice. And even if they're not making those choices consciously, they still have the right to make those choices, and we can't interfere with their choices. The
Yeah.
other thing too is it helped me with my kids. So when my kids were going through the mom's a horrible person, I tuned into their higher selves, and their higher selves both explained to me that they do not belong to me.
Hmm.
That my role was simply to be a guide so that they could get to a point where they could make choices in their life, preferably from a better perspective than people who didn't have the kind of upbringing that you and I provided for our kids. But I don't own them. They don't belong to me.
Right.
And that was a big part of it, is learning to let go of, oh, that's right. They're not my children.
Hmm.
I'm here simply to be a guide for them and prepare them for their path.
Hmm.
And the other thing too, as you were saying about learning how to let go, I think there's a lot of us when we first start on the spiritual path, kind of like almost like a savior complex. We need to save the world.
Oh,
And
yeah.
right. And then coming back to, oh, wait, that's not my job.
Yeah.
I'm simply here to be a loving presence on the planet and hopefully be an example of what's possible. But it's not my job to save people. When we go into that savior complex, it is, as I've said before, is that attachments create the suffering.
Yeah.
And when we can let go of the attachments, then we also let go of our own suffering that comes with it.
Yeah, for sure. I had the burden of over responsibility big time. I think I misinterpreted a lot that I saw in my near death experience. I was 18 years old and I was shown my work and books I would write, what I would teach, and my students, and just my path as a spiritual teacher. It was really challenging for me to let go of the over responsibility. I was almost paralyzed for over a decade, not going into my soul's work because I just felt like I couldn't do it. So I know there's light workers out there that might listen to this. And what I would just say is, if you have an over responsibility, let that thing go, because all we can do is save ourselves. Like, we can get aligned inside of ourselves, and then we can act like a lighthouse. And people who want to follow the light, they will seek us out and they will ask. And other than that, there's really nothing to do, because we can't get inside somebody else's head and shake them awake and make them follow a path of loving. It just doesn't work that way. So I had to let go of saving anyone other than myself and really just be a light and a guide for people who wanted it.
Right. Right. So I remember, I'm going to go back a little bit into who Cynthia Lamb is. I remember you telling me a story about when you were a little girl at church one day, and you grew up Catholic, right?
Catholic. Yeah.
And there was something I remember you saying about your name and you hearing the name Lamb. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I can remember two stories, super funny. I remember there was this one passage that they repeat at every service, and it's something like, uh, the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world, grant us peace. And everybody would say amen, and I would say, I will. And I just knew that I was the Lamb of God and I was going to bring peace. And then I got called out on it one time at a Sunday school. We were making a sheep. And I've always hated all of the analogies about sheep, because sheep are supposed to be these dumb followers. And my last name is Lamb. And so, I love sheep. So we were doing this thing where we were gluing cotton balls onto an outline of a sheep, and we were making a sheep. And I said, oh, I'm making myself. And one of the other children said, no, you're not. This is Jesus. Jesus is the Lamb of God. And I said, no, I'm the Lamb of God. Really, really funny. We got into a big fight, and I never went back to that Sunday school again. I just decided I'm done with that. And I stopped going to church when I was 8 for other reasons mainly. But I was able to see the hypocrisy. It was like we were being taught these loving things, and then people were behaving in ways that weren't in alignment with what the priest was saying. Even the priest was not behaving in alignment with what the priest was saying. And so I just ditched religion and became pretty actually cynical. I think I was probably an atheist by the time I was a teenager. And then I had a near-death experience and everything shifted.
So tell me about that. What happened? Because I talk to people all the time who have NDEs, and that's when their spiritual gifts get activated. I mean, fortunately, I just went through a financial near-death experience to have mine activated, but in your case, it was physical. So tell me about that.
Yeah, I had a ruptured appendix. It was misdiagnosed, and I went into a 10-hour surgery. And while I was on the table, this beautiful group of light beings just came down and reached out their hand, and I just took their hand and followed them up out into the universe. And we flew out into the center of the universe and landed on this platform. It was very similar to, I don't know if you ever saw that Jodie Foster movie.
Oh, Contact. Love that movie. Yeah.
It goes out in the time capsule. And yeah, so I didn't have a capsule, but I went out there and just received downloads of information. And I received information on why we're here as souls in a body, our spiritual curriculum, karmic lessons, how we reincarnate and repeat lessons that we don't finish, and the healing journey, how we can heal with the power of compassion. And so I just got all of these downloads of information, and I was shown my path as a teacher. And then at the end, I was shown kind of like movies of potential futures. So I was shown this time, and maybe for like the next, I don't know, 10 to 30 years in time, this transitionary time that we're in. And I was shown how things would go, and that there would be points where if humans rise up, we can actually stop what's happening, this whole transhuman agenda. And so I think that was the part that I really blocked out, was that last part. I came back into my body. I, woke up in this hospital room, and I really felt overwhelmed. I felt like I was not cut out for that job. Like, who was I to teach about love? Who was I to teach people to heal? I was a mess. And so I really,
18, right? You were 18 years old?
18. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I just locked up. And it took me a few years to begin to listen to intuition. My brother actually guided me to his spiritual teacher when I was 21. And that was my first spiritual teacher. She took me to her teacher, and he helped me kind of learn how to put a cone of silence around my gift of channeling, so that I wasn't channeling dead people. I leveled up from channeling everything, which was pretty chaotic, to just working with ascended masters and my own soul.
Okay. So I didn't realize that was part of it, is that when your channel opened, everybody got in. And I think that's an issue that a lot of people have when a channel first gets open. They don't know how to protect themselves from, um, for lack of a better word, even nefarious entities coming in. And
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, for sure. I think that that was one of my early lessons that I had to learn, was how to protect my own energy field. So spiritual protection has always been a very fond subject for me. It's not the main thing I teach, but I offer it. I have a free Protect Your Energy Field course workshop on my website that I offer, because for me it was like one of those things, it was like make or break it, because I was so empathic. I was just like a sponge. I was just taking in everything, and I wasn't able to function. And I certainly wasn't able to be of any service to anyone in that space. I just felt like, all of these entities were just pulling on me, and I was completely drained. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do. So, trial and error. Maybe it took me about 5 or 6 years to learn how to get that energy shield protected. And then I learned how to up level my gift and just channel what I wanted to channel.
Oh, so what I'm hearing, I've never put this together before, is the difference between being an open channel and a conscious channel. So being just an open channel, that could make a person crazy if they're just open and anything can get in. Where a conscious channel is consciously tuning into specific energies.
I think there's also another difference. There's trance channeling, where people check out and another entity comes in the body.
Oh,
And
yeah, I have a friend who does that. Yeah.
yeah, I was told never to do that because it changes the vibration of your own body. And so conscious channeling to me is being awake and remembering everything, and not stepping aside while another energy comes in. So I actually stay in my body, and it's like my antenna. My soul gets the message and it comes through. And nowadays I just channel my own soul. I don't really channel any other energies.
Okay. Yeah, for me too, it's primarily just my own soul, but once in a while, somebody else wants me to put a message out there on humanity's behalf.
Yeah. It's pouring here. I don't know if you can hear it, but it's
I wondered what that sound was.
I just came out of the rain, so I was like very, very damp. So sorry about that. There's nothing I can do about it. It's thundering on skylights. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it sounded a little like gravel almost, and that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you and I met in California, in the LA area, at Agape Toastmasters.
That's right.
And that was Agape. Even though I didn't attend Sunday services, being a part of Agape Toastmasters became part of my spiritual path. I would go there on Saturday and feel like I got enough spiritual food on Saturday that I didn't need to go again on Sunday. And then you and I became good friends. You were actually my Toastmasters mentor, and then you were my mastermind partner, mastermind sister.
Masterminded for years.
Yeah, and I had huge breakthroughs with that. I remember one of the ones I had, and we were meeting at one of the parks that we met at, and you would talk about what is the word I'm thinking of, the irrational beliefs. And I love that term, because when we start looking at some of our fear-based beliefs through the eyes of love, we can start to see how ridiculous and irrational there are. And I remember one that I had when we were sitting at a park, and it was about, this is a perfect example of an irrational belief. And the love of money is the root of all evil. And I sat there and I was like, wait a minute, that's not really love. How ridiculous is that? The lust of money, the fear of money, the greed of money, but not love. Right? It's like when we understand what love really is, then we can see how we can put love into everything, and that money is just a tool, like a rake. You can either rake with love or rake with hate. And I remember sitting on that rack, and I just started busting up. at how completely ridiculous some of our beliefs are. And you're teaching me how to look at my beliefs as, irrational beliefs has it gave me the ability to look at even some of the most painful parts of my life with humor
Yeah.
and lightheartedness. I'm going to call it lightheartedness because that's what spirit is, right? It's lighthearted, and learning how to interject that into everything that we are and that we do and that we see and that we feel, that lightheartedness.
Yeah, it's so good. So many people think that this journey has to be such a struggle, so painful. But if you think of the word enlightenment, enlightenment, what are we doing? We're lightening up, right? So
Right.
I learning to laugh at myself was one of my saving graces. That really, really got me through.
Yeah, me too. Before that, I was just the constant self-judgment, and learning then to flip that script out of self-judgment and instead learn to laugh at the so-called mistakes.
Yeah.
And which is part of compassion, right? Is humor. Because I'm just gonna laugh at myself over some of the dumb things I've done. Because they're all just learning lessons.
Yeah. We're learning and growing. We're all just doing the very best that we can. Yeah.
So you left California. And I remember you left California about the same time. Oh, I didn't mention the spiritual protection. So the same time I was learning spiritual protection from you, I was also learning it from someone else. And it was kind of like that beautiful confirmation that spirit gives us, that it's not just coming from one place, that, oh, I'm hearing it from here and I'm hearing it from here. What that did is it kind of solidified my own ability to use protection on myself. And I recommend it all the time to people, that we need to learn how to protect our own energy. And I remember you saying that one of your roles was to teach other healers and other light workers how to protect their energy and how important that was.
Yeah.
And so for anybody that's watching this and wondering how to do that, it's one of her things. And it has completely shifted my life. And I do a clearing and protection at least once a day for myself and for everything in my domain of care. And so, yeah, I have found that to be invaluable in my life. So you left California. Where did you go from that? I felt a little bit like an abandoned child. So I had to go through my own abandonment issues when you and Deborah both left at about the same time. And so I've had to work through part of that. I think for me was dealing with my own issues of my spiritual teachers abandoning me and having to learn how to become my own teacher.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so then where did you go when you left California?
I really followed guidance. I had been getting guidance for maybe about almost 10 years that I needed to expand. And I remember we talked about it in masterminding, that I needed to really just expand my reach. And I didn't know what that looked like. I didn't know how it was going to go. And I ended up getting a call from my mom that my stepdad had suffered a stroke. And I just got the guidance, go. And I just packed up my possessions, put them in a storage unit, and I drove to Delaware. And I spent 2 years caring for my elderly stepfather in a nursing home. I just visited him every day and spent a lot of time with him until he made his transition. And then before he died, I was guided to take a workshop on, I can't even remember what it was about. It was a marketing workshop, and it was in San Jose, California. And I had this really strong guidance to go. I'd asked the universe, show me what's next, show me what to do. And so I went to this marketing workshop, and I ran into a man at the counter. His name was Wilhelm. We just became instant friends. We went out to lunch together, And he invited me to Denmark. He said, what do you do? We had a little moment. We spent like 15 minutes. I gave him a little demonstration of my work. And he said, I want you to come to Denmark. He said, come to Denmark. He said, I want to learn everything you know. And I want you to teach. And he had a tribe, maybe about 700 or 800 people of his own. And so he introduced me to his tribe, and I started doing workshops in Denmark. And then it grew, and I was teaching in Germany and Brussels. And yeah, so my tribe is mainly in Europe right now. I was in Europe when this thing happened in March. So I had to get on a plane and get back to the US. So now I'm teaching on Zoom, and it's been interesting because I like teaching in person so much better. But now I'm being guided to get like a global reach and just do some online courses. So that's my next step.
And I will get to doing them in person again at some point. But Zoom, it's funny. I always laugh. I'm like, I wish I would have thought to invest in Zoom a year ago. We've been using it for years for classes and communicating with each other, but it suddenly has become the way that people communicate. And I still need to, like you, spread my wings a little bit more that way. I haven't taught classes on Zoom yet. I do TV interviews on Zoom. I don't know if I told you, I belonged to a Toastmasters club. It was called Camera Ready Toastmasters. And we met on Zoom before it was even the thing.
Wow. No, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So they ended up using us to teach other clubs how to meet on Zoom. But our entire focus was teaching people how to be seen and heard on camera. And that's the club that ended up pushing me into my DTM. I finally finished Toastmasters. I have graduated. It took me 10 years, but at least I finally finished.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. That feels amazing to have finally done it. And when I started with you, I saw you going through the process, and I had 2 little kids, and I said, there's no way I'm going to work that hard like Cynthia's doing, because you went through the program really fast. And
but you know what? I had such a guidance. I was being guided to teach, and I had a terror of public speaking. I could speak to maybe about a small class. I had been doing classes before I joined Toastmasters for a couple, maybe about 15 years. And my comfort zone was about 7 or 8 people. If I had 10 or 11, 12 people, I just would be stumbling over my words, freezing up, forgetting what I was going to say. I was afraid of any kind of size of audience beyond a very small handful of people. So that was why I ended up at Toastmasters, and I went through the program because as we launched out into district leadership, the crowds got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And I finally ended up speaking in front of 300 people, and that was it for me. I was like, okay, I'm cured. I could do this now. And I overcame my fear.
And then the other thing that it did is it what a lot of people don't realize is what Toastmasters helps with that, but it forced us to become leaders, to learn how to lead groups of people and organizations. And that watching you go through that process and in the rapid advance that you did through Toastmasters, that terrified me. At the very, very end, I realized I had, by default, had done everything needed to be a DTM, except for start a new club and be an area director. I was like, oh, I can do that.
Yeah. Good for you. I'm so glad you finally did it. Yeah. That leadership role. The last one I did was, go ahead.
I did it 10 years to the day.
Oh, amazing.
And I didn't realize that until later. I started laughing because I met you and I didn't know the paperwork for Agape Toastmasters was put in on April 1st of 2009. I got my DTM on April 1st of 2019.
Wow. That's kind of magical, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now this is actually extra funny because Agape Toastmasters anniversary is on April 1st as well.
Mm,
So yeah,
mm,
it was just complete coincidence, but um, I finished it, and
mm.
I tried to quit so many times, and Spirit kept pushing me back in.
Mhm.
Every time I tried to quit, I would get sucked back in again, and I finally said, "Okay, fine. Apparently I need to finish this up."
Yeah. I got those directions to do it like a command. It was like, "Do this thing," and I just was like, "Okay," and it was scary, but I did it, and I felt really, really glad that I did it. And the moment I was finished with that district leadership role, I knew that that was it. I was done. I was graduated and able to move forward. The last role I took was district sergeant at arms, and one of my roles was putting on all the technical stuff for the conferences, for their huge conferences and speech contests. And I was able to manage an event that had 300 people and keep it on time, be in charge of the timed agenda. And that work was so invaluable for me because I was able to take that and translate it into my own business. And I now have a really easy time managing my workshops, my retreats. It's just effortless to put it all together, the food, the registration. So that was like a master's degree in event planning for me.
Right, right.
At $40 to join, so
Yeah,
definitely.
pretty amazing. Yeah, I am still a big proponent of the program because it changes people's lives and it brings people like you and I together.
Yep.
So you've been in Europe and teaching,
Mhm.
and I'm so excited that you have finished your first book.
Finally. So that's the thing that took me 10 years, maybe even longer, maybe 11 years. So I have a copy of it right here. I'll show you.
Well, I mean, it was in your head before that for probably how many years before that? There it is, sourced from within. So we were talking 10 years ago about what you were going to call it and what it looked like, um, and it's really amazing to see it in print because I know and I remember somebody telling me once, and maybe might have been you, that I had at least a dozen books in me, and I thought, I'm like, that's ridiculous. So a dozen books in me. And then once you write one, you realize, oh, there are more. It's that
Yeah.
it's getting over that hurdle of publishing the first one.
Yeah, for sure. And I think mine was tied to my public speaking fear because I think I had some fear of being seen. And my big fear around public speaking was public humiliation. I had some idea
Mm,
somebody would heckle me or call me out, and that I wouldn't be able to handle that feeling. So I held myself back for a really long time, and I wrote the book between 2008 and 2000, maybe 11 or 12. I think it took me about 4 years. And then I started the publishing process and I got locked up. I didn't get accepted by any publishers and I went into some fear and I just set it aside. And it took me another, 7 or 8 years to pick it back up. So last year, I just decided I'm doing it. I picked it back up. I had one of my students helped me edit it. One of my dear friends did the cover for me, and it was just really graceful and easy to get it out. So it felt really like divine timing that it was finally being birthed. And now I have a floodgate. I have about 13 books that I'm working on.
wow.
Yeah, I'm writing
Wow.
one, and then the subject will change, and I'll stick it over in this one, and oh, this is about this one, and so they're all just really begging to come forward. So I hope
So
to
you
have
just,
another one out in a few months.
oh, that's amazing. So basically, you just needed to. to get the plug out of your birth canal.
For sure.
Right?
It was an agonizing birth. I called my student editor, I called her my midwife, because it felt like a birthing, a very long, just drawn out labor. And once that happened, I'm telling you, I pushed the button to submit it to the publisher, and this floodgate of energy busted through me like I've never had more come through. I was so creative. I had that month I was waiting to get my first copy in my hand was one of the most productive months I've ever had. So it just unleashed a lot of energy that had been plugged up. Feels really
Right.
good.
That's amazing. I know, and what you're saying about the afraid of speaking in front of an audience, afraid of being published, even though everything inside of you knows that's the direction your soul wants you to go. I see that that's fairly common among other people who are here to be messengers. I know I'm here to be a messenger, but how do I break past that fear of actually being seen and heard?
Yeah. Yeah. The book I'm writing right now is called Grow a Spine. And it's it's basically like a spiritual roadmap for people who crumble. And that one I feel is directed to those people, to those light workers who just feel afraid, who feel like they can't handle it, who feel like maybe they're over responsible, maybe they have save the world complex, whatever that thing is. We can heal that and then get on with it. And that's the light worker's path. The dictum is healer, heal thyself.
Right.
And most
I'm
people
going to be buying your book.
Say again.
I said, I'm going to be buying that book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So good. So people who don't know how, just know that there is a way, and sourced from within is like the basic foundational tools.
I'm so happy that you've finished that. So I'm going to put, once I find it here. There we go. I'm still working on StreamYard. So for those of you who want to learn how to get in touch with Cynthia Lamb, her website is vibrantfreedom.com. And so Cynthia, what is Vibrant Freedom?
Vibrant freedom is living in alignment with the loving. It's really following your soul's path, being in alignment, being one with your own innate divinity. And the outcome of doing the inner work, of integrating your personality to get aligned, is that this sense of bone deep contentment and tremendous joy, and what I call vibrant freedom, is the natural outcome of doing the integration work. And it's your birthright to live in that joy and that peace.
So in the space of vibrant freedom, there's a lot of what I'm hearing is self-trust. And the freedom to make conscious choices and not be afraid of those choices, of whether they're good, bad, right, wrong, and really living from the heart, and trusting the heart space to move us through life, within the loving, as you put it. Now, when you first started using that term, when I first met you, I was like, what is she talking about, living in the loving? It took me the longest time to grasp that. And now I really understand that, which is living life in love. And seeing all the fear swirling around us and recognizing it, and then seeing that it exists, because pretending it doesn't exist doesn't serve us either. Recognizing that it exists and approaching all of it with love.
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
of us, all of life, all of humanity, all that is in love.
It's like having love-colored glasses on.
Ooh, I love that.
Paradigm is the perspective through which you see the world. And when we're looking through the fear-based right wrong, it's almost like we have on, gray or brown glasses that color everything in that fear-based right wrong reality. And when we move up the spiral of growth and we shift paradigms, then we put on our loving glasses, and then everything we see is colored through eyes of love.
I love that. So, the rose colored glasses is seeing everything through, um, it's all good. And can even be not seeing the whole story that's swirling around us because we've got rose colored glasses on and no, that stuff doesn't exist. We're
Spiritual bypass, right?
spiritual bypassing. Exactly. So we take off the rose colored glasses and take off the gray colored glasses and put on ones that are crystal clear
Mm.
and that are loving. So seeing through the eyes of love in all things. And that takes practice.
Yeah, it's definitely not an overnight event for sure. But I think that if we can work with the parts of our personality that are in judgment, that are stuck in fear, and learn how to reel them in and get them congruent with the loving, that's really the work. Is that when we get off course, how can we love that part up and be in self acceptance and bring that part in and align it with the part that is loving. So,
Right.
yeah.
So ultimately, it's about the relationship we have with ourselves,
Hmm.
learning how to love every aspect of ourselves. Then, when we remember that we are love, having a human experience, when love becomes all that we are with ourselves, then that is how we see the world.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think that that's the hardest part is remembering, and learning that we are love. I think that it's a journey and that we can have a lot of patience because I think sometimes people get upset. They'll clear something one time and remember that they're love, and then the next day they're mad again, or upset again, or jealous again, or comparing again, and they get down on themselves.
Hmm.
And so for me, I think that one of the things that really helps me and my students, my clients, is to remember that it's a process, that it's an ongoing process. It's not a one-time event. We don't clear something one time and then we're done with it. We come back around and back around, back around, and there are layers until finally that thing will heal and resolve fully.
Yeah, and I remember that when I first met you, you saying that, and it took me a while to get that because I would heal, like be really excited about healing something, and then I have experience that where it's like, oh really? I thought I was done with that.
Hmm. I remember.
Really not. Some of it's still coming back around, and learning how to be okay with knowing that it comes back around for again another level of healing, another level of healing, and another,
Deeper
and
layer.
just another layer, and that there's no quick fix. And what has helped me to really grasp this is that when we're completely done with the healing, there's no longer a reason to be here. So, right? Transition out. There's nothing
I
else
don't
to learn.
ever stop growing. I
I
don't think
don't either. I don't
and going.
I don't think anyone, I mean, Yeshua, as I prefer to call him, is probably the closest any human being has come to being fully realized, fully enlightened. Nobody is. Every human being is in the process of self-mastery. It's never done.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the people who think that there's like this road and then there's a destination. And like there's going to be some sign that's like, yes, you have arrived. You know, you're done learning. You've crossed the finish line of life. Yeah, it doesn't happen. So expansion is an ongoing process. Evolution is an ongoing process.
Yeah. And to be really, really compassionate with ourselves in that process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The universe is a really big place. There's more to learn.
And the universe itself is always learning, always expanding. So it's never done. Yeah. Well, we have been on here for an hour, so I need to let you go. But it's been amazing reconnecting with you, and I look forward to seeing you in person again. I'm going to have to jump in my car and drive to Texas.
Come stay with me. I have a guest room now. So
Yay!
funny. I'm used to being at your house when I come visit, and now you can come and be with me since I've finally landed somewhere.
Yeah, and my house is more free as well. Now that my kids spend half of their time with my ex-husband. So I have 2 spare bedrooms now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right.
So
thank you.
You're welcome. It's been really great reconnecting with you. And again, for those of you that want to learn from Cynthia and what I call self-mastery programs, you can reach out to her at vibrantfreedom.com. Do you have any free gifts that you offer people who come to your website? Or
I have dozens of free resources. I have a year-long e-course that's a beginner's e-course called Walk Your Talk. I have the Spiritual Protection, which we already talked about, e-course. There's podcasts, blog. Yeah. So that's under resources. And then my first workshop should be online very soon. I'm hoping to get it up within the next month.
fantastic.
Yeah.
So you have come out of the spiritual closet entirely. That's what I call it, right? How many of us are hiding ourselves in a spiritual closet? And I know you've been teaching for years, but this is a whole nother expanded level of your teaching. And it's great to see that you're not afraid anymore of stepping out and being who you're here to be.
Thank you. Yeah, feels really good.
Yeah, I'm right behind you. It's my personality self still battles with me sometimes about stepping out, but I'm getting better when I start to hear that little voice that says, do you really want to do that? I'm like, okay, why? What is the resistance that I'm hearing? Is this resistance coming from spirit telling me it's not the right time? Or is this resistance coming from my personality self being afraid to go into this next step? I think that what I've been sharing with people recently is that we're in what I call we're past the information age. Now we're at the age of discernment. And that is a muscle that we're all really learning how to utilize. And discernment is within our own head, being able, part of it is self-trust, understanding whether something is doubt or if it's discernment. And is this my ego talking to me, or is this my higher self talking to me? And that takes that being still and listening and going inside and determining which voice is talking to me and which direction do I go with what I'm hearing. So I think we're all at various levels of that, and it's great to see, and I kind of sense that with the publishing of your first book, I was like, okay, Cynthia's out. and now you can see why, clear back when you were 18 years old, why that message was given to you. you've finally, I guess, grown up enough to be able to step into that role. No longer doubting of why little old me did I get this message. Now really owning why you were given that information.
Yeah. And it took as long as it took. I mean, I'm 56 years old now, and there was a part of me that was judging me at, 28, 35, 42, like, why haven't I done this yet? And, at this point, looking back on it, I'm just surrendered. It took as
Mhm.
long as it took, and here I am now. And at this point, I am really just surrendered to the universal timeline for me, what is in my own divine timing, and it's finally flowing. And that feels really good.
Right.
So if your life isn't flowing yet, what I can say is just hang in there, hang in there. And just, for me, I just had to keep doing my inner work to remove the obstacles. But now it's finally flowing. And that is a good feeling.
That's fantastic. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being here. It's been so amazing reconnecting with you and having you share your gifts forward with whoever sees this video now and in the future. And I am so incredibly grateful to you for your presence in my life and for being, I have to laugh because for years I told people you were my spiritual mama, and then I laugh because you're like 3 months older than me. So, and that yeah, you made such an impact in my life and helping me find my own spiritual path that I wanted to share you with the rest of the world.
Mm. Thank you. I appreciate you, and it's really sweet to hear that. So thank you. I receive that gratitude. Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, and I learned that from you too. I learned from you how to gratefully receive.
Mm.
Yeah. And that's been huge in my life.
Mhm.
Well, thank you so much. Please, those of you who are watching, look up Cynthia. She is life-changing. What I've learned from her, I am looking forward to reading your new book, Cynthia, and all the other books that are coming forward. And hopefully this is the first of many times that we communicate on camera.
Thank
And
you.
oh, you're so welcome. And for all of you, as always, get bold, be fearless, and live free.